Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Throughout this week, we've explored leadership from several different perspectives. We discussed what leadership is, the traits of effective leaders, charismatic leadership, transformational leadership, and ethical decision making. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most practical leadership skills you'll ever develop: communication. Leadership, it has to be communicated. You can have a great vision, sound judgment, and excellent ideas, but if you cannot communicate those ideas clearly and effectively, it becomes very difficult to lead others. Communication is one of the most powerful tools a leader has for building trust, reducing conflict, improving morale, and guiding people through difficult situations. This lecture is about learning how great leaders communicate, especially when the stakes are high. Today's lesson supports two important course learning outcomes. First, we'll continue examining leadership during high-stress incidents. Second, we'll begin applying a leadership communication and de-escalation skills in supervisory settings. By the end of today's lesson, I hope you'll begin seeing communication not as something leaders do after making decisions, but as an essential part of leadership itself. Think about the best leader you've ever worked for. Chances are one of the first things you'll remember is how they communicated. Were they approachable? Did they explain their decisions? Did they listen? Did they remain calm during difficult situations? Communication shapes organizational culture. It influences employee morale, and it affects public confidence in the organization. It also determines whether people understand and support the mission. Throughout my career, whether in the legal field, teaching college students, directing on my programs, or serving on the school board, I've learned that communication often determines whether people feel respected. People may disagree with your decisions, and that can happen a lot. But they are far more likely to accept the decision if they believe you listened and communicated honestly. So what is the communication process? One mistake new supervisors sometimes make is believing that communication means talking only. In reality, communication involves both speaking and listening. Great leaders explain expectations clearly, but they also ask questions. They seek feedback. They check for understanding. They clarify misunderstandings before they become larger problems. One lesson I've learned as an educator is that if students aren't understanding something, it's worth asking whether I need to explain it differently. Leadership communication isn't simply delivering information. It's making sure a message is actually understood. That's true whether you're teaching a class or supervising a patrol shift. Sometimes you just have to explain things differently. A very important and underrated skill, probably the most underrated leadership skill, is active listening. Listening isn't waiting just for your turn to speak. Listening means giving somebody your full attention. Listening means asking clarifying questions. And it means making sure you understand before responding. One thing public service has reinforced for me is that people often want to feel heard before they want solutions. A lot of times, the people who are struggling with issues, the biggest thing is they want to feel heard. Whether speaking with students, community members, faculty, or colleagues, I've found that simply taking the time to genuinely listen often lowers emotions and builds trust. This same principle applies in criminal justice. People cooperate more readily when they believe they're being treated with dignity and respect. I have to laugh. One of my mentors, he was such a good human being that someone told him once, you could execute somebody and you could make them feel good about it as you're strapping them to the execution chair. And that is because he believed in the inherent dignity and respect of every person, even people he was prosecuting. And that is an important skill to take with you. So let's talk about verbal communication. Leaders communicate constantly, and it's not only through speeches or at meetings. Every conversation matters. Good leaders are going to choose their words carefully. They remain calm. They explain their decisions. They avoid sarcasm. They avoid emotional reactions. And they remain professional even when others are not. One lesson I've learned over the years is that you cannot control another person's emotions. The important thing, though, is that you can control your own. That self-control often determines whether a difficult conversation becomes productive or becomes an argument. Professionalism begins with communication. Communication isn't only verbal. People also pay attention to your body language, your facial expressions, your posture, your tone of voice. Even how you use silence and periods of silence can communicate something. Think about a supervisor who walks into a room visibly frustrated. They haven't spoken a word, but everyone immediately senses something has changed. Leaders communicate long before they begin speaking. And this is one of the reasons emotional intelligence is so valuable, because it helps leaders remain aware of the messages they're sending, even unintentionally. Now, every leader has to deal with this, and this is having difficult conversations. This could be correcting employee behavior, addressing performance concerns, responding to citizen complaints, resolving conflict between two coworkers. These conversations are rarely enjoyable, but avoiding them almost always makes the problem worse. I've learned throughout my career that difficult conversations become easier when they're approached with respect, preparation, and the genuine desire to solve the problem instead of assigning blame. Leadership is not about winning arguments. It is about improving people and improving organizations. So let's talk about de-escalation for leaders, because this could become possible in these difficult conversations. So when people hear the word de-escalation, they often think about interactions between police officers and members of the public. They de-escalated that situation, but supervisors use de-escalation every day. They use it when employees become frustrated, when disagreements occur, when stress is building or rumors spread in an organization. Great leaders recognize rising emotions early and respond before conflict grows. That doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means conducting these conversations in ways that reduce defensiveness and encourage cooperation. There's a good saying out there: calm communication creates calm organizations. That should be the goal of you as a leader. Another important time for communication skills is during a crisis. Communication becomes even more important during critical incidents. Employees want information. The community wants answers. The media wants updates. And so leaders face enormous pressure in these situations. One lesson I've learned through governance and leadership is that honesty builds credibility. It is okay if you don't know something to say, "I don't know, but I will get back to you." People generally understand that investigations take time. What we do in the criminal justice system is not something that you can solve in 42 minutes like on Law and Order. What damages public trust is pretending to have answers before the facts are available. Strong leaders communicate what they know, they explain what they're doing, and they remain transparent throughout the process. That doesn't mean they have to have all of the answers right away. So here's a supervisory scenario. Imagine you're a newly promoted patrol sergeant. 2 experienced officers have just finished a difficult call. Now they're arguing loudly in the report writing room. Other officers are watching, and your response is going to influence everybody present. Do you immediately start assigning blame? Probably not. Instead, you separate the officers if necessary. Allow their emotions to settle. You listen to each perspective, and then you begin gathering facts. and do what you have to do to guide the conversation through resolution. Leadership communication is about lowering emotion while also increasing understanding. Now let's look at a community scenario. This is something that any leader can face. I've faced it. A community meeting becomes heated following a controversial arrest. Citizens are angry and media cameras are recording. How does the police chief communicate? Well, they should be transparent. They can share what is known and acknowledge what is still under review. They should act with empathy. Validate the community's concerns without becoming defensive. Just because you're showing empathy does not mean that you are agreeing to or supporting something terrible that has happened. Engage in active listening. Allow citizens to speak. Demonstrate genuine engagement with your community that you've been entrusted to protect. And act with public trust. Every word and action either builds or erodes that trust with the community. I would argue public trust and transparency are actually go hand in hand and are vital to the success of a law enforcement agency. So let's connect to our course outcomes. Today's lesson directly supports several of them. Effective communication strengthens ethical policing. It improves officer morale. It increases operational effectiveness. It builds public trust. And it prepares leaders to manage high-stress situations more effectively. Communication isn't simply another leadership skill. It is one of the primary ways leadership is demonstrated every single day. So for a reflection, and you can share these if you want to in the comments below. Think about the best leader you've worked for. How did they communicate and what made people trust them? I shared about a mentor of mine from the district attorney's office earlier, that he was very kind and treated everybody with respect and was very a skilled communicator. I mean, he was a lawyer, so he should be. But think about how this person communicated. What was their tone, their word choice, and how they handled difficult conversations. And what built trust? How did that person build trust? Reflect on the consistency, the honesty, and the empathy they demonstrated over time. And how will you develop those skills? I want you to identify one or two communication habits that you want to intentionally build as a future leader. And again, working on a little, chiseling away at those habits one day at a time is all it takes to become a great leader. Let's review what we have learned. Leadership requires clear communication. Great leaders listen as much as they speak. Professionalism begins with self-control. And difficult conversation should be respectful, direct, and solution-focused. Communication is one of the strongest tools leaders have for building trust and reducing conflict. When leaders communicate well, organizations become stronger. I'd like to leave you with one final thought. People may not remember every policy that you wrote. They may not remember every meeting you led, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Did they feel respected? Did they feel heard? Did they trust you? Leadership is ultimately about relationships, and relationships are built through communication. As future criminal justice leaders, developing your communication skills may be one of the best investments you can make in your career. In our final video for week 1, we will bring everything together by developing a strategic leadership plan focused on improving morale, operational effectiveness, and public accountability. I'll see you in video 8.